Hello, welcome to another talk from the Abyss. This is your host, Abyssm, and today I want to talk about some of the first, well, you'll see the title will be some of the first weird tunes I made, and they were weird. One of them I made was I Got a Spider in My Pants. That was in Fruity Loops, but prior to that, on that little onboard synthesizer that was on the sound card, I mentioned that in the previous talk. Uh, I made several little songs, but I do have an ear. I can tell when things are not in key, and it was pretty difficult to do anything. But that was one of the things that got me going. Of course, after that, my then partner and I moved into N track, as I discussed in the previous broadcast, and there we had congruence because she was playing guitar. So, as you know, if you're a singer, you don't need to know what key something's in, or if it changes key, you just basically change what you do. It's a very intuitive process. But once I got into Fruity Loops, I started working with the MIDI and stuff, and then, like I said, I got a keyboard. I did that song, the Spider in My Pants song. I'll dig it up. If as I do enough of these broadcasts, we're going to get into some real weird stuff. I do have a song that you're going to hear at the end. It's off my first album, which was 23 tracks. That was put out in 2003, and that was my Theory of One moniker. And I've changed the name, but it's always been just me with some collaborators. That first album, I do not think it has any collaborators, but after making that album, I started getting involved with a music forum called the Auditorium, which I'm going to talk about in another broadcast. Today, I want to talk about just the process of making tunes, and what a thrill, right? And one of my early things is that I would just avoid chords. Now, the thing is that I know now with my current music is that everything I do, it starts with harmony initially. Every track I do is basically based. I come up with a interesting chord progression, oftentimes based on something else. But I always make it my own, and then later on, I work that up into the song bed, and from there, um, if I'm going to sing on the track or whatever, I'll sing. But back in the day, I mostly would do my writing with like a bass. And the thing is that the harmony always ends up being implied if you drag any of those tracks into, something like the chord thing in Studio One, now called Fender Studio Pro. That's my DAW. We may as well mention that now. But back in Fruity Loops, it's hard for me to actually remember. So much of what I would do a lot of times would just be starting with a little drum beat and then a bass line, right? And that song I mentioned, "Spider in My Pants," had a bass going, doom, 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 right? And then I had a little clip, "I got a spider in my pants, echo, echo, echo." What a thrill. What a thrill. So many cool things you could do in that old version of Fruity Loops. I think at that point they actually were calling it FL Studio. They never did like being called Fruity Loops, but I guess it's still going. And I can still. What's great is I guess it was a demo version on that CD that came with the Sound Blaster. Um, I know I upgraded, and I upgraded a couple times, and you get lifetime updates. So here we are, way more than 20 years later, and FL Studio's taken off. Now, why did I not stick with FL Studio? I can tell you why. I actually, very interestingly, moved to another program called Project 5, which we'll discuss at another time as well. But the thing is with the FL Studio interface is it's kind of schizophrenic. You have your notes in one place and you have your arranger in another, and you can get used to that workflow. I put out my first three records in FL Studio, and I got used to it, and I could probably get reused to it. I think I probably dipped my toe in about 3, 4 years ago and just says, ugh. I don't just don't like that workflow, but it's a very, very useful and competent program, and it was in 2003 as well. And I really enjoyed using it. And you can put together very sophisticated tracks there. Don't get me wrong. That's not the limitation. It's just, yeah, I prefer a more linear workflow, right? Anyway, I started building tracks and I got really into it, very interested and obsessed by it, I'll be honest. And once I collected, I probably did, I don't know, I was probably doing a track a night. That first album I put out was called One, Theory of One. And that was because I was the music forum that I was involved with, the auditorium. I was the very first member of that, and I was a forum administrator there as well. Like I said, we'll get into the auditorium later. There's a real great story there to tell about the early days of the like for like economy, and it hasn't changed one bit. And in many ways, this channel and what I'm doing here is my solution to that problem. Now, I might grow some sort of audience, or it might never get past 20 subscribers, if that, but that doesn't really matter to me. What I do want people to hear my music, and that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this. And I really totally got plenty of tales to tell about making music in the early days of music production in the aughts. Yeah, lots to impart there. So it's all good, and it'll be there. It's evergreen content, and I think meaningful content that will find some sort of audience. Um, I had probably 40, 50 tracks. I narrowed it down to 23 tracks, or I think that was the number I picked, but they're all much shorter. And one of them, like I say, I think the best of them. There was many good songs in that first album. It's very experimental though, and there was a work associate I had at the time who was a musician, a bass player, like a real musician. And I gave him my CD, and I gave him each one of my CDs. I was probably doing two a year back then. And I remember him commenting to me, it's like, well, you started really experimental, but now you're getting more song based as you go. I ended up singing more. That first album had most everything on it was instrumental. I only had one track where I did sing, and that track's okay. It was definitely an experimental process, and that's when I enjoyed. I enjoyed playing with the synthesizers and the sounds. I absolutely adore VSTs to this day. And they had them back then. I think FL Studio had a few that I would use. One of my favorite things to do in FL Studio is you could do something like a little hi-hat pattern, and you could very easily pan it across the stereo field. Even these days, I have a bit of a hard time doing that. I have, effects, VST effects that will pan, um, but it's not quite the same. It was really a cool effect. I really loved it. And, we're getting close to the end of this talk. I want to talk about symbolic distance. So I was really into making the music, and I think what happened is I got a really bad cold and my back went out. I wasn't able to even really sit around and do the music. And the song Symbolic Distance was the first track I did after a period of this sort of illness. I mean, it's not like I was, terminally ill or chronically ill, but I really love the hopeful quality it has. And I think it holds up with the stuff I'm doing these days, 20 years later, as a great tune. It has a hopeful quality, a strident quality. One of the things I really love, and I have had a hard time finding that effect, is there's a gated effect that I used to use. It was very simple, and you'll hear it go dit 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 da. If I knew better how to work that kind of thing, I could probably find something that would do something similar. But there, right out of the gate, it was easy to get an effect like that. The other thing is there's a little bit of pretty facile keyboard playing on this track, which I'm proud of to this day. And I hope you enjoy hearing it. And I'll be back real soon with another Talk from the abyss. Meanwhile, take good care. Stay out of trouble.
Let me introduce myself. Let me introduce myself.